We're so excited to have you and just kind of ask you some questions, get to know you as a fellow Texas educator. And I guess I can kind of kick it off. We have some people here and just give you a little introduction before we dive in, if that works for you.
Yeah, that's great.
Awesome. Well, to some of our guests here, we have Todd Nesloney here, an author, speaker, educator, also known as Tech Ninja Todd on some of your social platforms. So here today, just excited to talk a bit about his story, get some advice for educators today in this climate that we're going through.
Yeah, perfect.
Great. Well, if you could just kind of kick it off for us, Todd, to tell us just a bit about your story and why you wanted to become an educator.
Yeah, so I have been in education for goodness 16 or 17 years now. I've been a teacher, an elementary principal, and now I get to work for the Texas Elementary Principal and Supervisor Association and serve leaders all across the state and through across the country and world from some of the speaking that I do. But, I always knew I wanted to work with kids. I didn't know at the beginning that it was going to be in education. I thought it would be in social work until I realized I'm not good at disconnecting myself emotionally from the social
So
work.
difficult.
So knew that wasn't going to work for me and fell in love with teaching and have stuck with it ever since.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I know definitely with social work it's difficult, but awesome with
Yeah,
teaching, you still get to make that impact every day.
exactly. And I knew that, I never had an educator that really impacted me as a kid, but I know how important that is. And so that was also one of the goals is I want to be that teacher or that administrator that those kids remember 20 years down the road.
Awesome. How was that transition from education to more education leadership?
It was crazy.
Yeah.
I always tell people I have such a unique journey in all the things that I've been a part of, but I got my master's right away when I started
Yes.
teaching because my school district had signed some kind of deal with a local university where we got it discounted if we went and got it. And so I just wanted to be the first person in my family with a master's. I didn't actually want
Mhm.
to use it. And so I always said, never be an administrator. Like that is not my thing. And then of course, when you say never, then it eventually ends up happening. But I got a Twitter direct message one day from a district up the road who was seeing some work that I was doing on social media and asked me to come in and
Yes.
interview. And I was like, no, thank you. I don't want to be a principal. But then they were like,
Yeah.
no, you get to hire your entire staff. We're starting over from scratch here. And I was like, oh, well, that's kind of like a dream job. I'll
Yeah.
see like what y'all are about. Interviewed, fell in love with the district and the school, and ended up getting the job and spent the next 5 years there. And it was wild and crazy. And I learned there was so much that I didn't know that I thought I knew
Hmm.
when it came to leadership, but learned a lot.
Awesome. Yeah, so I mean, of course, right now we are going through a difficult time for educators. What is your advice for any educators that we might have on here that will see the recording later, who are feeling burnt out and overwhelmed due to these unexpected challenges over the pandemic?
Well, the first thing I would say is don't minimize how you're feeling. Own those emotions and know that it's okay to ask for help,
Hmm.
whatever that may look like for you, whether it is during the pandemic time or in
Yeah,
other times in areas of our life. I know that everybody in every role has experienced things that they never imagined and never could have prepared for. And those in education went from being greatly celebrated at the beginning of this pandemic to being
yep,
vilified and lied about, where we're dealing with now. And that just burns people out even more. And so
exactly.
I would say find those things that you love, find those people that you love, and surround yourself with that and try to block out the noise as much as possible.
Hmm.
Always easier said than done.
Yes,
I
of course.
that. But I know that when we keep our focus on what brings us joy, it makes the hard stuff just a little bit easier. It doesn't eliminate it and make it way easier, but it makes it just a little bit easier where we're not thinking of quitting every 5 minutes. Maybe it's just every other day.
Yes, a little bit more balance.
Exactly.
What are some things that you found to kind of keep your cool and calm during
Yeah.
these times?
I always say that I have to think about what I'm passionate outside of my job.
Yeah.
sometimes what happens with us as educators is we can define ourselves completely by our job because we love working with those students so much, or working with those adults. But the reality is we have to have pieces of ourselves that exist outside of the job. And so for
Yeah.
me, whether that's going on walks in my neighborhood or gardening or just watching Netflix,
Yeah.
is, or any other of the streaming services, is just such a stress reliever for me. But I
Hmm.
also think, it's an identifying taking care of yourself, whether that means seeking, like for me, I suffer with severe anxiety. And so I finally got to a point at the beginning of the pandemic where I had to get on medication. And I've always been that person. I was like, oh, I don't need that. Like, that's not a big deal. And when my doctor said, look, you have to stop minimizing these things and stop acting
Hmm.
like only if you have a really bad problem are these things necessary. He said, if this is what you need, this is what you need, and you have to be okay with that. He said, and to work through this anxiety, you have to have a workout regimen. It's not just medicine. And you have to
Yeah.
start going and seeing a therapist because it's not just medicine. Medicine
Yeah.
helps 40%. And so when I took that leap and jumped into therapy as well about a year ago, it changed my life.
That's
And it was so funny
fantastic.
because when I started therapy, my therapist was like, so why are you here? And I was like, I don't know. I just know
Why are
this
we?
is a good thing to be a part of, and
Yep.
have any huge issues that I know of right now. But you learn some when you're in.
Yes.
But it's one of those things. My buddy Daniel Patterson, who does a lot in the mental health world, he once told me, you go to see the dentist twice a year just to check up on your
Your
teeth.
teeth. Yep.
You're waiting for that big issue to arise. And so we have to start thinking of our mental health in the same way. We don't wait for an issue to arise. We've got
Hmm.
a checkup kind of thing too. So that's kind of my advice. That was a long answer, but
No, I loved it. That was great advice, and it's very like mental health, physical health. It all goes together, and especially right now with teachers going through a very difficult time and quitting in such large numbers, it's just key that to focus on. You need to be your best self to be able to be your best self for your students.
well, and I think something important to remember is sometimes we can hear people have these conversations, and right away we go, well, how am I supposed to take one thing off my plate? How am I supposed to make time for this?
Hmm.
And I have to remind myself, because I get caught in that mode too,
Yeah.
that I always have time for what I make time for.
Yeah. Oh, that's great.
When I am focused on my to-do list and all that has to be on there, I realized very quickly the to-do list is never going away. It's only getting things added to it. Yes, I'll take some things off, but if I don't take care of my mental, physical, emotional health, then that list is going to get out of control because I'm not going to be and like at my best. And like you just kind of said, I always have said too, if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of others. And that's literally what our job is taking care of others. So
Exactly. Yeah, great answer. Yeah. So with all this being said, what are kind of your hopes for the future of education, Texas and beyond?
when I think of the future of education, I hope that all the conversation we've had over the last few years about social emotional learning, I hope that continues. I
Yeah.
hope it's not just a flash in the pan, and I hope we start seeing in our field how important that learning is for the adults too.
Hmm.
Being in the field of education, we can sometimes tend to put all of our focus on the kids. Yes, that's why we're there, but I believe equal focus has to be put on the staff. There needs to be things in place for the administration. There needs to be things in place for the teachers, for the instructional aides, for everybody involved, if we're going to retain them and want them to stay. So I hope that social emotional learning continues on, and I hope that we just find more ways to collaborate with each other, where we
Yeah, I love
continue
that.
to tear down the walls and reach across the aisle and just work with people from all over the world, because as we've seen through technology during the pandemic, we can
Yeah,
reach anyone if we try hard enough. So,
exactly. Yeah, and so with proximity learning, what we mainly do is we live stream certified teachers into classrooms across the country. So focused on really making sure that students who need a teacher, who need an educator, have them. So feel very, very similar with you on that message. So taking it back a little bit, what drove you to write your first book, Kids Deserve It?
One of my good friends is Dave Burgess, and he and I were friends before he started his publishing company, and his Teach Like a Pirate book went off. And he had always been asking me to write, and I had said from the start, because I struggle with imposter syndrome all the time, and so
Mm-hmm.
I just told him, I don't think I have anything to say. I don't even know where I would begin. Like, writing a book is so daunting. So I just kept saying no. And then one year I was at the National Elementary Principal Conference in San Diego and met another administrator there, and we hit it off. And over dinner one night, the conversation came up about excuses, and the phrase "kids deserve it" came out between us. And I thought, oh my gosh, like, that is such a good reason on why we can eliminate these excuses, because our kids deserve the best.
Mm-hmm.
And so we said, let's write a blog post about it. So we wrote a blog post, and it was really super easy to write together. And so we said, let's write a few more. And then I realized, you know what? Maybe I could write this book with someone else.
There you go.
Writing this blog series has been so easy. And so we pitched the idea to Dave. He loved it. And that's how Kids Deserve It was born. One of my co-author is based in California. I'm based in Texas. We wrote the entire book through Google, and we never actually hung out and wrote any of it together until the manuscript was completed. So
There you go. It can get done.
yep.
Awesome. Are there any other ways that you feel like you've been able to use technology throughout the pandemic, just in general, to help your career and through your social media platforms, etc.?
My biggest thing when it comes to technology is making sure that no matter how I'm utilizing it to connect with, build relationships, and learn from others, to continually make sure that what I put out on social media is never solely a highlight reel.
Yeah.
Never solely all the good stuff. I think sometimes I get lost into some people that I follow and think, oh my gosh, everything works for them all the time. Like, all their stuff is huge. It's amazing. Like, I suck in comparison, and I easily get caught in that kind of cycle of comparing myself. And so I try as best as possible through any platform that I use to be real, to be vulnerable, to share all of me, not just the teacher side of me, because I feel like when we share our stories, when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, it allows others to come next to us and say, me too. And where they might not have yet had the strength to share that piece of themselves, you sharing it allowed them to feel less alone. And so I don't know if it's necessarily me using new ways of connecting. I'm using what everybody else is using, except TikTok. I only have a TikTok account because I'm obsessed with following people.
Yes.
TikToks. But I think I want to be out there and a voice who shares that there's a lot of things that fail as well as things that succeed, not in a negative complaining aspect, but just in a being real and vulnerable aspect.
Yeah, being authentic.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I love one of the TED Talks with telling your stories. Why do you feel like now is more important than ever for teachers to be sharing their stories?
Well, I mean, if you look at anything that's taken off lately in mainstream news or with school board meetings or community, it's clear to me now more than ever that there is a huge misunderstanding of what truly happens in our schools.
Yeah.
And I think I've always told people, if you're not telling your story or the story of your classroom or the story of your school, someone will tell it for you, and it's not going to be the story you want told. And so when I look at now and I see all these people talking about CRT and ban these books, and I'm like, that does not go on. Like, that kind of craziness is not really happening. One person said something that was insane that you all are believing. But because there's not enough of us sharing the brilliant, beautiful things that are happening in our schools, we get lost in the what is really happening, what's not really happening. So I think the more educators that are out there and just sharing the brilliant, everyday things that they're doing, because I think that's where some of us get lost. And I have to share the really amazing, big, good stuff. It's like, no, you are doing great things every day. Just share what you're doing every single day and allow people in to see, I'm not just babysitting. I'm not indoctrinating your children. I'm growing future citizens that are going to change the world. And here's how we're doing it.
And people get into teaching because of that. That's why they want to be teachers, and to respect them for what they're doing every single
Yep.
day, as small or big as it may be.
That's right. That's right. The amount of work that you're doing cannot be quantified, in my opinion. And so the more you can share, you are brilliant. You are doing great stuff. I don't care how you feel. If it's not good enough, put it out there because somebody needs to see it.
I love that. And then I know we have some people here on live. If you have any questions that you want to ask, feel free to drop them. And then as we're also talking, anything that you have coming up that you want to share, exciting news, whatever it may be.
Well, I guess there's three things I could share. One is I'm starting to travel again since COVID has
Awesome.
um, leveled out a little bit. I don't want to speak too soon. You know, everything goes crazy when we start to get excited.
Knocking on wood.
Yeah, but I'm starting to travel a lot and present more, and so that's been exciting. It's been hard leaving my two little twins that are now 8 months old, but it's great to be able to support and provide a life for them. But the second thing is I got a new book coming out this summer.
Awesome.
I'm co-writing it with a poet named Tanner Olson, with Lanisha Tab, and with Alice Lee. It is going to be different than anything else any of us have put out. I'm so stinking excited about it. We're actually submitting our final copy in the next couple weeks. And then the third thing is I am part of a conference series called Get Your Teach On, and I do the lead on section for current campus, district, and aspiring administrators. And we have our national conference coming up in Orlando in June, and I am so stinking excited about the Get Your Teach On and Lead On National Conference. So those are my three things that I've really got pumped coming up.
Oh, that's awesome. What can people expect from that conference?
So the reason I have involved myself so heavily with Get Your Teach On and Lead On is that I love things that are different, things that are outside of the norm. There's so many PDs that I have attended that have been very traditional, and there's a space for that. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing.
Yeah.
Sometimes I want to go to a PD and just sit there and do nothing but listen to somebody for a few hours.
Yeah.
But for leadership especially, I feel like there isn't any differentiation between PD. It's all dry and boring. And so in growing Lead On, I wanted to create something different. I wanted to have that excitement, that energy, that fun, but you also are going to walk away with a lot of meat, a lot of immediately implementable ideas. And I want it to look and feel like a party, but you walk away with so many things that you've learned that you were like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I had that much fun and stuff. Like, what the heck just happened? That's exactly why Lead On was invented and created. And just like there, administrators need it.
Yeah, they do.
Administrators need the excitement and growth too. It's the teachers are so important, but they need strong leaders as well. So we're trying to help build that excitement and energy with them too.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that. I think it is very much, you hear about all these exciting teacher conferences and so forth, but really not much for the administrators. So that's a huge space.
Yep. And that's also why I'm involved with TEPSA. I mean, that was the reason I took the job with them, is because to Texas pre-K through 8th grade leaders, there is no better association than TEPSA, and their summer conference is going to be amazing too. First time in 2 years they've been able to have it, so I'm so excited about that too.
That I can only imagine the energy and the excitement that's going to be there. We're Austin based, and so South by Southwest is going on in EDU, and you just are starting to feel life come back to these cities.
Totally.
Yeah, fantastic. So how can we find you?
Well, I mean, the easiest way is on my website, toddnesloney.com. You can just Google how you think Todd Nesloney spelled. It's going to come up. There's not that many of me out there.
Good.
But all my social media is on there, my blog, my books, everything is on there. But that's the easiest place for me to send people.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining today and being part of this conversation, sharing your advice. And it's just something consistently teachers need, the educators need, everybody needs right now, just some positive outlook and knowing that be your authentic self and it will work out if you're being real to you. So we really appreciate that.
Amen. Thank you so much for having me. It was a blast getting to chat.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Todd. Thanks everyone for joining. Bye.